And so the advisor may pick that up and say, well, this client doesn't seem to really be listening to me. So what happens is I talk more. I talk more, I explain more. And the more I talk, the more I explain, the more I get the dopamine hit, the better I feel. And then out come the charts and the graphs and all the experience and all the explanations. And I have just given the client everything. And I sit back and say, that felt good. But the client long ago checked out of the conversation. They didn't hear a word you're saying because it was all about you and how you are the expert, and it does not create trust. Mm-hmm. Third level is critical because transformational
This is the Future Ready Advisor, a show about transforming your financial advisory practice. I'm your host, Sam Sivarajan, a wealth management consultant, behavioral scientist, and keynote speaker. In this podcast, I dive deep into the real challenges advisors face and bring you insightful conversations with top industry experts. Together, we'll explore practical strategies grounded in behavioral science to help you better serve your clients, optimize your time, and build a future-ready practice. Hi, everyone. I'm Sam Sivarajan, and welcome to the Future Ready Advisor. Joining us today is Mary Schmid, a thought leader, author, and the creator of the Conversational Edge system. Mary specializes in helping financial advisors revolutionize their client relationships through the power of neuroscience-backed communication. Her work goes beyond numbers, focusing on how meaningful, trust-driven conversations can transform the advisory experience. Mary, I'm very much looking forward to our conversation. Welcome.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you for inviting me to be with you today.
Well, I'm delighted to have you. I think this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. I truly believe that having meaningful, open-ended, trust-based conversations is a key differentiating factor in the future of this industry. And so I'm eager to dive in. You've developed your Conversational Edge system based on neuroscience. Can you share with the audience the concepts of the system, your journey that led you to focus on what you call transformative communication, and why you saw this as a gap in the current financial advising space?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I believe that there is lots of good advice out there, whether it's financial psychology, behavioral finance, behavioral psychology. There's lots of good advice out there. And what that advice does, it tells us about mistakes that people might make and how to identify them. And what we do is we tell people, this is what you need to do. But think about this for a minute. When we tell our clients, this is what you need to do, what happens? Maybe they'll follow it, maybe they won't. Mm-hmm. And I think the same thing happens to me as well as the advisors. So we need to take a look at going back to understand the root cause of how do we lead conversations that beget trust. And for me, that was really understanding that there's this invisible conversation that goes on. It's a mix of neurochemical and emotional interplay in our brain, in every single one of us. It transcends gender, generations, cultures. It's true for all of us, and it influences what we think, feel, behave. And the important piece is how we then impact others. So the nuts and the bolts of it is very simple. Conversations result in two things. It results in us either opening up, or conversations lead us in such a way that we close down. We feel protection. And when we feel protection, cortisol is running through our brains. We can't think, we can't understand, we can't listen, we can't respond, because we're busy defending ourselves. So the system that I developed takes neuroscience and puts it into a principle-based system that you understand the principles, because, conversations are as unique as our fingerprints. And it's not about what you say and how you say it. It's about understanding the impact you have with others. So how did I get into this? Well, I'm telling you, it's a long story. So I'm going to give you the short version, Sam. I was at healthcare executive, and I thought I was good at conversations. I listened to people. I told them what to do. I gave them good advice. But you know what? Some people were easy to talk with, and other people I couldn't just break through. And I thought, well, there's got to be something more that I don't know. And my great leaders would just say, keep talking. You'll get people on the same page. Mm-hmm. They'll figure it out, and they'll come along with you, and they'll go with you. Some did, some didn't. But I thought there's got to be more than that. But you know what the turning point was? When my family said, oh, you know what mom does? She's a babysitter, an expensive babysitter to doctors. That was a moment that I thought, it's sort of funny, but it's not really funny because it's true. Because I kept working and telling, and I was exhausted. And I wasn't really thrilled about the results that I got. So, being a research nerd, I simply said there has to be more than what's there that I don't know. And what is it? And I discovered it was a whole neuroscience of conversation. So I studied with a team of neuroscientists, not just to learn the science, but how can we take this and apply it to everyday conversations so you and I can be better at working with people, leading with people, whether it be our clients, our staff, our centers of influence, and the people that we love. So I was doing this work, and one day a financial advisor who had heard about the work that I was doing with leaders said, "Well, I think I'd like to work with you." Now, most of us like jump for joy, right, Sam, when we get a new client? Not so much. I thought, wow, what am I going to do? You see, I had had several experiences with financial advisors that were less than stellar, that left me feeling like, I don't think I get it. I don't think I can do this. In fact, I just put my head in the sand, like many people do. But I thought to myself, okay, well, let's give it a try. So we started working together. And part of the work that I do what we call a real play, where we take a real situation and we work through it. So we took my situation of having not great relationships with other advisors, and we worked through it. And as we're working through it, I thought to myself, my gosh, he's good. Well, of course he was, Sam. I taught him. But beyond that, he led a conversation in such a way that I really felt understood. And at the end of that, I thought, even though I'm a skeptic about financial advisors, I became his client. And that was the beginning of it all. From there, I worked with the firm, and together we wrote the book, Make or Break Conversations. And I've been advancing the work by working with people, teaching them the principles based on neuroscience and evidence based of how to have a good conversation. Because at the end of the day, what I learned is that the whole blend of knowing what it's like sitting across from you, as well as knowing what it's like sitting with you as you're leading those conversations, has developed into great insight. And I keep coming back to, when you lead conversations in a way that builds trust, you make a difference in people's lives. And that's what I'm up to, is helping advisors lead better conversations. So not only do they have a better business, but they really impact the people they work with.
I love that. I think there's a couple of elements that you said that really hit home with me. The idea that there is a difference, there's a gap between intention and action. And it isn't knowledge, it isn't anything else. So this is that gap that I think that the advisor really struggles to help the client bridge, because every client comes in with the intention of getting their finances in order, of saving for retirement, of paying for their kids' college, or what have you. But it doesn't translate into action. And a part of that conversation that I think that you're talking about, that invisible currents that you're identifying, is working in the process of having an open, honest, meaningful dialogue with the client to understand, yes, this is your intention, but you're not translating into action. So what's happening in between? What is it, whether it's cortisol, whether it's anything else, what's happening in your body or in your brain that is stopping you from executing on what you clearly have said that you want to do?
Right, right. And it starts with the advisor. What's happening in your brain that shuts you down, that you're not able to lead a meaningful conversation? And then when you learn that, then you can identify that in your clients and help them overcome the obstacles or the hurdles that translate knowledge into action. And the trick is, the key, it's not a trick. I really dislike that word trick. What happens is you become their partner. And when you're their partner, they count on you, they rely on you, they'll tell you what is going on, they'll give you every information that you need, because they want you to guide them and help them. They trust you. I think that's so key. And this is great to the next question that I wanted to ask you. So you emphasized, and you talked about it already, this concept of transformational conversations. And to set the stage for our advisors listening in, can you explain the difference between a transformational conversation and a transactional or a positional conversation, and why you believe that they're vital in financial advisory practices today? So let's start with the bigger frame and the bigger picture. There's 3 levels of conversation, and each one has a predictable result on whether people will open up and connect to trust or close down and protect. And we need all 3 levels, but we have to use them at the right time and at the right space. So a level 1 conversation is simply information. We use it all day long. What time is it? Where's the meeting? All we want is we have a question and we want to give an answer. But if that's all that we use, it's sort of like going through the checklist of, this is what I need to know about the client. Right. It's what I need to know. There's no involvement from them. There's no emotional connection, and there's no trust. Financial advisors are smarter than that. They lead what we call number two is positional conversations. And that's hallmarked by we're smart enough when we ask a few questions, but we go into the meeting with sort of a preconceived idea about what we know and what the solutions are, and that we're the right person with the right answers, and it closes down the conversation. So what happens is we're smarter than the average bear, so we listen, we ask a few questions. Oh gosh, I know what the problem is, and then we proceed to tell our client, well, this is what you said, here's the problem, and here's a way to fix it. Well, that might work. Clients may agree, but the problem is that most clients, most people, most of us, when we're in the conversation with someone who is smarter than we are, they have a position of expertise, won't speak up, and we won't push back because we don't want to look stupid. So we go along to get along. We say, okay, okay, okay. But really, we don't quite get it. And so the advisor may pick that up and say, well, this client doesn't seem to really be listening to me. So what happens is I talk more. I talk more, I explain more. And the more I talk, the more I explain, the more I get the dopamine hit, the better I feel. And then out come the charts and the graphs and all the experience and all the explanations. And I have just given the client everything. And I sit back and say, that felt good. But the client, long ago, checked out of the conversation. They didn't hear a word you're saying because it was all about you and how you are the expert, and it does not create trust. Third level is critical because transformational conversations are conversations where we care enough to share and discover. It's not about being right. It's not about judging. It's about opening up the conversation where I can really understand what you think. I share with you what I think. We go back and forth. It's a dialogue. It's a dialogue. And what happens when we have that kind of dialogue is our brain is flooded with oxytocin, and we know what oxytocin does. It opens up the brain, opens up the prefrontal cortex, so we can think, we can problem solve, we can create. But most of all, that's where trust originates.
Right.
We cannot trust and have a trusting conversation when we're feeling threatened and people telling us what to do. We have to elevate and use more of a level 3 so that people can open up. And we give how we lead the conversation determines that. 85% of our conversations are level 1 and level 2 across the board. That's what we've been taught. That's what we're really good at them. And so it's sometimes a challenge to insert more of a level 3 to open the doors to a conversation rather than being in the position of power or telling people what to do. Level 3 conversations, involve things like curiosity and wondering what's going on. It requires a beginner's mindset to sort of be this blank slate, the blank canvas, where you really are curious and want to understand that person versus walking in with the agenda that I'm going to tell them what to do and I'm the expert. It requires empathy, that you understand not only their situation, but you begin to understand how they feel and the impact that has on them. What is their thinking and what are their feelings? And it requires a vulnerability for us to also then be open to share appropriately and in the right context. So level 3 is required for us to develop trust.
That's a really powerful point you made there, Mary. I've always understood, and I totally agree, that we tend to be in our industry more comfortable in level 1 and level 2 because we're time constrained. We believe that our clients are coming to us to solve a problem, so we feel like we have to solve it. But you're right, where most of the magic, if I can say it that way, is done is in level 3. And that requires everything that you said. It requires a genuine curiosity, a bit of intellectual humility, and the idea that you can ask these questions without there being an answer. You don't need to have the answer. And in fact, the client themselves don't need to have an answer. I think they may not have even thought about some of these things. But to me, the objective is to try to get that on the table, on that client's radar, if you will. And the challenge is that I believe, and I'd love your opinion on this, that we try too often to fill the silence, fill the gap, and then move on to the next item on our checklist. But I think the real magic happens in level 3 by waiting for that silence, for that situation to kind of sink into the client. And before moving on, maybe there's an answer, but maybe it's a surface level answer. So then the next level comes into digging deeper to ask a follow-up question to suss out exactly what it is that client is thinking. And partly, I think this is a conversation where it's verbal brainstorming. I think half the time I'm not sure that the client would know the answer, but they're talking it out to say, okay, does this sound right? Does this feel right for them, for themselves as much as for the advisor?
And what happens when we create the space for our clients or our staff? This also applies to leaders. When we create that space for people to process out loud, what happens? All of a sudden, they hear themselves sharing things and thinking things out loud,
Right.
saying things out loud that they've never had the safety in a conversation to say
That's a good
before.
word.
And when people hear that, they begin to think about what else and it develops an insight. And that's where the advisor then comes along and simply supports that and simply says, it's not all just touchy feely, but it's about, so now that we know this, how can we, you and I, together in partnership, create the next step? I love you use the word magic because you know what it feels like, Sam, when you're able to lead conversations at a level 3, it feels magical. Like I don't even know what happened, but it feels magical and it feels good for me as the advisor. But can you imagine
Right.
what it feels like for the client or your colleague or your center of influence, the person sitting across from you? Can you imagine what that feels like? Well, all they know is like, this is
This
like,
is different than what I'm used to.
yeah. And they walk away saying, this has been a great conversation.
Right.
And it has, because you've known how humans respond in conversations and you know how to orchestrate your own conversation so that you can open people up and then you can listen and ask questions that have no answer and that are relevant and really get to the higher level thinking, the higher level problem solving, the creativity, the innovation.
Now, I agree with all of that. I'm going to put a challenge to you, which I'm sure you've heard from advisors, and that is the fact that all of this is magical, as the word that we use. I'm sure most advisors can see the value in this type of a conversation. But it is a long term kind of investment, if you will. And because advisors and clients, this isn't going to be the first meeting. We have a transformative conversation and we understand everything that they want. That trust is, it's like dating. You build that relationship over time. More information comes out that you build on. So, on the one hand, we want these types of conversations and recognizing that it is going to take time and commitment and effort on both parties. On the other hand, advisors are often focused on immediate needs of the clients. The clients are coming in with a specific financial goal or retirement planning or investment planning. So, how would you advise an advisor that they balance these two competing timelines and goals and still be able to use the principles that you articulated about transformative communication of helping clients uncover the deeper values, fears, or hopes that, as we discussed, that clients themselves may not even be fully aware of?
Right. And I think that's a good question because sometimes I do get the pushback, well, this is going to take a long time. And I say yes. And when you get it right, is it more important for you to be right and tell the client what to do or to get it right and really understand them? Because if you're in it for a short term transaction, get it done, it's not going to work. But if you're in it for the longer haul to really set the foundation of developing a relationship that's going to be long term, this is the way to go. And in essence, when you get the flow of it and you really develop your conversational system, I'm not sure that it takes all that much more time. The second point that you address is it's really easy as a financial advisor to say, okay, the person is coming in because they want to retire. I get that. That's the goal. And it's easy to focus on the goal and tell them what to do because it's concrete, it's tangible. We know what to tell them what to do. That's a level 1, maybe even a level 2.
Mhm.
But what if I ask to imagine you as a client came in and said, well, I want to retire. And you, the advisor, said, okay, let's talk through that. Like, what's going on? What's going on? How does that impact you?
Mhm.
What else do you want to tell me? The client said, well, nothing. I just want to know this. You, the advisor, can say, well, no, it's not about selling my plan or this or that. I meet you where you're at. This is the information you want right now. Meet the need, meet them where they're at.
Mhm.
Being a transformative conversation doesn't mean that you don't meet them where they're at. In fact, it enables you to meet them where they're at because you're listening intently. Okay, they're ready to just talk about the retirement. Now I've got the situation. Now I've got the picture. Then I can say to my client, okay, this is what I understand. Did I get it right? Not be right. Did I get it right? Okay, so this is what you want for today. And then we begin to do the work. So the first step, client, I would recommend is that we da, 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 da. And then you can sort of step it out and simply say, so for today, this is what we can do. There's a lot more there, but let's start with your immediate concern. What is your immediate concern? And let me address that. And then once we get that piece understood, then we can move on. But you always need to take the time to really understand the situation, not assume that you do. The retirement may be the thing, or the transition, or the job loss, or the whatever. The thing isn't easily identified, but we know that there's so much more. And you can use more of a level 3 to understand a little bit more of what's underneath all that. And when you show the client that you understand that, my gosh, they will open up and tell you exactly more than sometimes you need to know, but they'll be in sync with you. You know, it's our mirror neurons. When I hear that you understand me and you understand me, we have this sort of like magnetic picking up. And that's part of where the trust grows. It's the empathy of the syncing up together, that you get me and I get you, and you're going to meet my need, starting with where I'm at. Advisors say that all the time. Well, we're going to start with you and where you're at. And so they get into the conversation. All of a sudden, it's like, well, that gets skipped over. And what they want to say is, well, we need a plan, and then we need this, and then we need that. It's not that I disagree that we need a plan, but sometimes we take a different road to get there.
No, that makes total sense. And you're right. You can totally be solving their problem. And let's use retirement as an example to say, okay, this is, you want to get a retirement investment plan. We can start that process today. But some of the things that we'll want to consider as we go on this journey is, where are you going to live in retirement? How are you going to replace your social network that you had from work in your retirement life? And it's not necessarily that you are solving those problems or engaging in that conversation, but you're putting markers down as an advisor. And I believe that shows the client that you are thinking deeply beyond the immediate sale, and you put colored teasers for that client to start thinking about, and maybe even look forward to that next meeting that they're going to have with you, as to say, okay, this is going to be, something more than simply hand over your statements. We're going to talk about something deep and meaningful. I better think about it and be prepared for it. And maybe one thing I would add to what you were saying is that it's very powerful that you made, and there's a lot of behavioral science supporting that. Too many advisors look to kind of having the answer and having the solution. And yes, if what you want to do is feel good and feel proud that you're the expert, go for it. But if what you're looking for is to be a good advisor and be a trusted partner, there's a lot of research that says, and this is the principles behind coaching, that if you can help the client come to the understanding that this is what they must do, like sort of on their own, without you telling them do this, you're going to find a solution where the client not only is going to do it, they're going to own it. And so they're more likely to stick with it. They're more likely to trust you. They're more likely to refer you. You've got a better outcome. Yes, you don't have that ego boost that you gave them the answer, but you've got something better, a happy client.
Yeah. And I agree with all of that, Sam, because in essence, what you're doing is you're becoming their thinking partner. You're not a telling, not a persuading, but a thinking partner. Is there time for all of your expertise? Absolutely. The technical expertise that you bring is what makes the difference and what's changed people's lives.
Right.
But when you first understand their life and what's going on with them, and then put in your expertise, you come up with sharing your ideas. That's that partnership, is that co-creation. You have value, I have value. And when we put our value together, we come up with things that you don't even think about, or that you haven't even thought about. And when you are proactive in identifying that, or nudging people's way of thinking, they're blown away. They go like, wow, I've never thought about that. I've got to go home and think about that. Yeah.
Now, many financial professionals, and I'm sure you've had this experience, Mary, believe that they communicate effectively with clients. After all, that's what they do on a daily basis. What do you see as the most common blind spots that you've observed in their conversational approaches, and how do you think that they can better address them?
It's exactly what you said. And it's exactly what I said in the beginning with my story. I think I'm a good communicator. Face it, you wouldn't be where you're at today and as successful as you are if you didn't have some ability to communicate with other people. So I think that I'm a really good communicator. And that blind spot is, you may be good, but does your communication build trust? That's the question. So a good conversation doesn't translate into a trust building conversation. And it's a trust building conversation that keeps reinforced with every meeting, every phone call, every communication that builds your relationship and your lifelong client. Oh, Sam, clearly some people are not ready to do that. They have that blind spot that says, good, I'm good, and good is good enough, and that's where I want to stay. And I say, if that's what you're thinking and feeling, I tend to believe differently. I think you can be better. I think I can be better. I think we can all be better communicators. But if you're with 90% of the people that think good is good enough, that's okay. But along the way, as we're developing as human beings and developing into the way that we talk about people and developing and learning more, there's going to be a whole shift of people that really do want to and that will talk with you and have a deeper kind of conversation. And if you can't have the skills to do that, or you don't know how to do that, you're going to be left behind, because clients talk about this. They talk to each other about that. They say, oh my God, do you know what Mary said today? It was so funny. And so it's not even about necessarily their personal financial plans. It's about the relationship. And when you develop that relationship, people tell other people. And if you can't develop that in a way that is solid and predictable, then I think that you will be left behind.
It's very powerful. And it reminds me of the quote, I think it was the poet Maya Angelou that said, long after people forget what you said, i.e. the technical part, they'll remember how you made them feel. And that's a critical point of what you're talking about. The purpose of this conversation isn't just to hand over information. It is part of it, but that can be done via email or anything else. It's also every opportunity of interaction, I hear you saying, is an opportunity to leave your client feeling more comfortable, more trusting, more like they're a partner in this relationship than as it's a transactional.
Yeah, because you've taken the lead in the conversation to lead with trust. You find out what their challenges are, you make it safe, you create that openness. And when you do that, very few people do it successfully. I'm going to give you, we're both research nerds, and when you say that whole thing about, people won't remember what you say, but they'll remember what you feel. Research shows that. We know that. After a 1-hour conversation, I've forgotten 90% of it. After a week, 70%. After 24 hours, 70% of it. After a week, 90% is forgotten. But you know what's never forgotten? Our brain remembers how you made me feel. And I will never forget that. So it's powerful.
Super powerful. Along that note of how you feel, financial discussions, good or bad, often trigger fear responses for all of us, right? I mean, there's so much uncertainty going on. We're never sure whether we're prepared. We don't know what the world has in store for us. So what practical strategies can advisors use to create this sense of safety and openness that we touched on during these conversations?
Yes. And difficult conversations, challenging conversations, I call them that moment kind of conversations, come out of the clear blue, and we have no way of preparing or knowing that they're going to happen, which is why we need to understand the principle behind that. And the first principle is when your client is emotionally charged, or it's a difficult situation, or emotions are running high, they're running on red, meaning that their amygdala has taken over, the cortisol has flooded them, and they can't even think, they can't listen. All they can think about is themselves and how right they are or how they need to. So our first job is to lower that. And how do we do that? We really listen to them and say, what is that situation? It's what I call listening to connect. What's the situation that you're talking about? What's the impact? Then part of it is that then empathy comes in and simply say, I understand. This is tough. I understand. This is difficult. We're so afraid of empathy because we think that it's emotional. What it is, and you can't create trust without emotion. You've got to be able to manage the emotion. So empathy is part of the emotion. So let's manage it. So you're empathetic. You say, I understand. We also fear empathy because we think that we have to do what the client says, or we simply don't know what to do. And I think most of the cases, we simply don't know what to do. So we skip over it, or we say, well, I understand. Let me tell you about the time that I know what you're talking. No. Stop that and just understand. Now you've got the understanding, and your comeback is, this is tough. This is a difficult, I understand. This is the magic. Then we switch to having one foot in empathy, but we really do understand the feelings people are having in a situation. But our other foot is based on the reality in the future. And it's like compassion. So how can I support you with what you're going through? You're done. You don't have to fix anything. You don't have to solve anything. You don't have to become a therapist. Simply, I say simply, understand, listen to connect, to understand the situation, go a little deeper about what they're thinking, feeling. Well,
right?
it sounds simple, doesn't it?
No, and you're right. I don't mean it to be glib, but you're absolutely right. The empathy that's a very, very deep point that you're making. I think empathy isn't about fixing it. It's understanding and,
Mhm.
sorry, empathizing with the situation that's there.
Yeah,
And
I
you touched on
understand.
something earlier that I'd like to dive into a little bit. It's part of being empathetic in the right way, in the right time, without getting overly personal, is also for the advisor to be vulnerable, right? To be able to share in the right time, in the right, and not in every situation, but their own experience with something that they've gone through. So if the client is talking about their inability to get out of debt, for example, and I'm making this up, but maybe the advisor can talk about part of the way that they approach in an empathetic way is they say that being authentic, being true, that they've dealt with this when they were younger, or they've had family members that are dealing with it. I think this gives that client the sense of safe space that they're not an aberration in going through this or feeling this, etc. That everybody goes through it, that even the expert or the advisor that they've come through. And the danger for a lot of advisors is that they feel that yes, you have to be professional, but there is a danger in kind of keeping this, look, I don't ever make any mistakes. I don't ever have any of these problems. So I'm the expert that you're coming to. Yes, you might create a sense of expertise, but you don't create a sense of empathy or vulnerability or a partnership of somebody that understands the shoes that I'm in right now, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that vulnerability piece of it because it is so true that when we are just the experts, remember we set up the power differentials, power over versus a partnership where we meet eye to eye, face to face, and heart to heart, and we're partners in all of this. The vulnerability piece of it, yes, yes. We ask clients to be vulnerable with us, to share their innermost thoughts and feelings and desires and hopes and dreams. And what do we give back? I have two responses to that, Sam. The first thing is once we really listen to their story, the clients will ask you, and what about you? We don't have, I never advise to lead with a story because we want to hear their story
Right.
first. But if we're really listening and attuned to their story, they're going to say, and what about you, Sam? What's your story? Why do you do this? What's all this stuff on the walls about? And do you have kids? And that there's the opportunity to
Yep.
share
Appropriately.
appropriately and succinctly. Well, yes, this is who I am and this is what I do and this is my family. And yes, I have 3 kids. And oh my gosh, some days I just don't know. I'll pull my hair out because I can't get these kids ready for school before I. Then you can share a story with a little bit of humor. But I always say, whenever you share about you and share your story, the critical piece is that you are vulnerable also to share what you've learned. We're all human. We're not perfect. We've made mistakes. So if it's debt, and maybe it wasn't you that got into debt, but you can share a story about um, your nephew who
Exactly.
did that and simply says. And so when I talked with my nephew, what I learned was it's so easy to get caught into that and not really step back. So you make it relatable, you make it human, and you make it not afraid. You're not afraid. We ask them to open their code. We need to appropriately open our code. And when this comes to storytelling, they go first.
Mhm.
And you then, when you tell your story succinctly, shortly, there's a lesson to be learned.
That's very important. It is always about them, the client. So you're not trying to one up them with your story. You're simply trying to demonstrate, illustrate that you're empathizing with them without
Yeah.
shifting the attention back to you, right?
Right. Right. And in fact, sometimes my advisors will even do when it comes to a story about it's an origin story or a story, let's with the story, they'll say to their client, I've had an experience about that. Can I share that with you?
Hmm,
Wow. It sets a
that's
stage.
powerful.
It lets you know that I'm open to share, but I'm also being thoughtful about do you want to hear about it?
Right.
Very powerful. That permission seeking really gives people autonomy and freedom to say yes or to say no. And nothing builds trust more than feeling like we're in control.
Yep. That respect.
Yes.
So we touched on the seemingly easy term that we used about being human. I want to dive into that, especially when we see all over the news about technology, tools like conversational AI that is going to revolutionize financial advice. How do you see the interplay or the complementary, if you will, between AI or technology and the human aspects of trust building and advisory practice? Do you think there are any risks that we might be over relying on technology for client interaction?
My answer to that, Sam, is I think we need to make technology and even conversational AI as they're developing more and more capabilities is our partner. So when it comes to technology, it can be our partner to help us to be more efficient, more productive, so that we free our time out to be with clients. But as we do that, we always need to ask, it's sort of like having a discovery process with your technology. Like, okay, so what is it that you offer? How is it that I can use that? And the third most important question is, so I get this new bright shiny object, which is the best ever, am I willing to change and adapt to allow you in to do the things that, am I first of all willing to learn and willing to adapt my workflows so that we can make this a better situation so that I have more time to be with my clients? The whole piece about this conversational AI, and it's developing quickly and fastly, is it will never ever, in my opinion, my humble opinion, take away our ability to read the nuances of people as we're converting with them. It can give us topics or structures or things that we need to consider and even ways to approach it. But we need to take that and use that in our own words, our own voice, our own personality, understanding how people respond in conversations so that we can lead those conversations in a thoughtful, meaningful way. It will never replace my ability to read your eyes, to read your body language, to listen to the tone of your voice, to watch when you turn away or
To
when
truly
you lean in.
empathize.
And you know what? It will never, ever take away the whole ability. And this is really an important thing, to read your energy. You know,
Mhm.
within less than a second, people will read your energy. Are you
Mhm.
friend or are you foe? While AI has many benefits to it, we need to be careful that we, as the human, have many talents and abilities as we understand other people.
Mary, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, my own humble opinion is also that technology is powerful. I'm not a Luddite. I think
Yeah.
that there's value to be added. And I think the characterization as it being a partner to financial advisors is one that I share. I would add that it would be dangerous for any advisor to think of any tool or any technology, or in fact, any partner to offset what is their core competence or core advantage that they're coming to in a client relationship. If why a client is coming to you is for your trust, your empathy, your understanding, and you try to outsource it to somebody else, even the chat GPT, and the question becomes, well, why does a client need you? And that, in my view, should be always the question an advisor is asking. What is my core competence? Why is my client coming to me? And how do I continue to deliver it? And how do I use technology and other tools to help augment what I can do for that client, help reduce my time and effort on other things that I'm doing that is taking me away from what is my core competence? And if they can do that well and systematically and consistently, advisors can leverage tools like AI to build a better practice.
Yeah. I would go one step further. It's not only your core competency as a financial advisor, it's your core value. So why are you
Good
even in
point.
this business in the first business? If you're here to help people to help themselves to make better decisions, and how you do that is by guiding them through the conversations that you have. That's nothing that we can't do that with technology or AI. That's your core value. That's your core competency. And that's what people come to you for. Yeah, I can go to Chat
And why?
GPT and simply say, and I have done it actually. I've done it. I said, how do I express empathy? And it will give you very, very direct, he'll give you direct directions. You must listen actively. You must do this. You must listen actively. You must respond back. You must paraphrase. You must do this. You must do that. Yeah, I know that. That's not what I'm asking you. And then I query it further, and I get the same thing. So it can provide a guide. It can provide you ways to think about things. In fact, a lot of the technology that's coming out, and a lot of things that advisors can purchase, will give you guides of, here's the transitions, or here's the stage of life, and here's the things to be thinking about. I think that can be great in terms of always looking forward and say, did we address this? And did we address, not just the immediate concerns, but as we develop our relationship and we continue working with each other, do we develop proactively ongoing concerns, or do we I use this proactively to develop the kinds of questions, is it estate planning? Is it tax planning? Is it this? Is it what about the kid? I mean, there's all sorts of things. Different stages bring different problems. And so it can trigger our memory to make sure that we talk about that, but it'll never replace the value that you bring. If you believe it as an advisor, job, your value, your core being, your core essence is to help other people, to help themselves, to make the decisions that are the best for them. That will never change.
Totally agree. Mary, we're coming to the end of our podcast. So I have a few final rapid fire questions for you that I ask all my guests. So if you're ready,
I am ready.
number one, professionally, what is the most important lesson you've learned over the years?
Learning from a 7-year-old. And that was there's always more than one right answer to every problem, every solution, every challenge. I have a 7-year-old and I was going to put her in the shower one evening and she simply said, "You don't need to tell me what to do. I don't need no 97-year-old woman telling me what to do." Well, now, of course, I laughed at that, but I thought you're absolutely right. I assumed that telling her what to do is going to get the results that I want. Even though she goes to the shower and even though she doesn't soap up, she's 7 years old. So that it was a lesson that I remember is that then I backtrack and said, "Can I be with you in part? And can I just go with you? I know you know how to do it. Can I just hang out in the bathroom and visit with you while you shower?" "Oh, well, sure, that's fine." But you see, that powerful lesson, I always think back on that, is that there's always more than one right answer to every solution. I may not have the right answer and I may not be right. But it's that openness to say, it's more important to get it right than to be right.
That's a great lesson and a great story. The only thing I would add to it is not only that there's more than one right answer. Ultimately, even if you have the right answer, it doesn't matter if the other person doesn't believe it's the right answer, right?
That's right. Your answer is right. I would agree. I would agree.
Number two, what is one practical tip you would offer listeners keen on applying your insights?
Yeah, actually, there's two. The first one is through our conversation, Sam, which I really enjoyed and it's been lovely, is that you really have understood the science of connection and protection and that you are leading the conversation that causes that reaction. It's predictable cause and effect relationship. So as you're in your conversations, begin listening to yourself and say, where am I telling? Where am I persuading? And how can I open up? You can adjust in the moment that conversation to really move people from protection to openness. You can do that. You've got the tools and knowledge to do that right away. Because we never change people. We never get them to change. We act as a partner
Right.
and help them to do the change that they want. The second thing is I cannot emphasize enough the whole role of context. Why? The context of what we're doing it. When you're delivering advice, when you're giving recommendations or you're looking at implementations, the whole word because. I'm telling you this because you said this was important. So therefore, here's three ideas that I want to share with you. What you've done is you've given the context, you've given the frame of where the conversation is going. Our brain loves to know where we're going. And on top of that, you've created that partnership. You see, you connected the dots. You said this, I did this, we'll do this. Incredibly important.
Love it. Mary, such a great, fantastic discussion on a very timely topic. If listeners want to learn more about you or find your work, where do they go?
They can go to maryschmid.com/future ready.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us today on the Future Ready Advisor.
Sam, it was my pleasure and my privilege to join you. Thank you.
Today on the Future Ready Advisor podcast, I was speaking with Mary Schmid. Here are my 3 key takeaways from our conversation. Number 1, trust starts in the brain. Mary highlighted the fact that every conversation either builds trust or shuts it down. Literally. Neuroscience reveals how the brain responds to connection, oxytocin, or protection, cortisol. And the advisor's role is to lead with curiosity, not control. Trust is built not by being right, but by getting it right, with empathy and understanding. Number 2, move beyond the checklist. Too many advisors stay stuck in level 1, information, or level 2, positioning types of conversations. The real magic happens in level 3, transformational conversations marked by openness, discovery, and emotional safety. That's where clients truly feel heard and insights emerge. It's not about scripting. It's about showing up as a thoughtful, curious partner. Number 3, technology can support but not replace human connection. AI can suggest ideas, automate tasks, and improve workflows, but it can't replace your energy, your empathy, or your ability to read the room. The value you bring as an advisor is in helping people feel safe enough to think clearly and act confidently. That's what clients remember and what they talk about long after the numbers are forgotten. You've been listening to the Future Ready Advisor. If you enjoyed the show, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or a rating on Spotify, or share your feedback wherever you listen. Be sure to follow the podcast so you never miss an episode. For more insights on how to keep your practice future ready, visit www.samsivarajan.com. You can find the link on the show notes. There you'll find free tools and resources, along with exclusive bonus content from these podcasts. Thanks for tuning in, and I look forward to sharing more strategies with you in the next episode.